All right, well, hello and good morning, everyone. I'm Russell Palmer here with Galileo, and I'm so thrilled that you all have been able to join us today for our session on getting started with OpenAthens administration. We really wanted to do something on OpenAthens admin for the Galileo conference. There have been some great changes this year, and things like adding multiple administrators and other things that we wanted to make sure that you all are familiar with. For those of you who are not implemented with OpenAthens yet and you decided to attend to learn a little bit, this is a good opportunity to do that as well. And I look forward to getting those implementations done in the coming months. I want to introduce to you Jaime Barrilleaux. Jaime is joining us from EBSCO today. EBSCO is our partner with OpenAthens implementation for support, training, and project management. And Jaime is joining us from Louisiana today. We both agreed it was hot. I'm sure it's hotter and probably more humid and probably more rainy looking at the news this morning, Jaime, by you all. And Jaime does a lot of training and creating video content and other training tools for EBSCO. And currently, in her ongoing work and life, she's also working on a PhD in educational policy, organization, and leadership at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So we are thrilled to welcome Jaime to talk with us more. Jaime has done training for us on OpenAthens admin in the past, so she's familiar with Galileo and how we work and what we do. But without further ado, Jaime, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that, Russell. It's nice to meet you guys. If I have not actually hosted a training with you, I am so happy to have this opportunity. So as Russell said, we're just going to kind of talk about how to get started with OpenAthens administration. Now, a quick disclaimer here. This will be a very kind of high-level, broad overview, but I will point you to some resources that are available to you toward the end of the session to go a little bit into, to take a deeper dive if you want to pursue that once today's session is over. Because I also want to, provide ample opportunity for questions and feel free to post those questions or verbally ask those questions as we go along. But, if you do prefer to hold them to the end, then that is fine as well. So I am going to spend most of my time in a live demo environment, so I don't have a lot of slides. That's why I didn't actually upload anything. But some of those resources that I share with you at the end, I will provide links to those as I'm talking about them in the chat box as well. All right, give me one quick second to get switched over. And you should now be seeing my OpenAthens demo account. So we're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to look at accounts, then we'll talk about resources, and then we'll also talk about how you can use groups and permissions to manage your accounts and resources. We'll take a really high-level look at linking before we finish up with a look at usage reporting and how to kind of manage your attributes and your privacy policies. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start with accounts first. So you have a few ways to actually access your list of accounts. You have a shortcut that's available right here, or you can actually access your account listing from the account menu at the top from anywhere within the dashboard. So once you've kind of navigated away from this home screen, you do always have access to this list here. Now, we'll circle back in just a minute about these account types that are over here to the left. But first, I would just want to point out that if you have a local directory connected to OpenAthens, and you may have more than one, as you can see here, any of those accounts will be populated to tabs at the far right past the deleted tab here. So we can see that I do currently have 2 connected. And, if you have an active connection, you would see as accounts are being populated, you would see a counter on this particular tab. Now, I'm not going to necessarily navigate away from the screen, but I just do want to kind of point out where you can go and review your configuration for that. And that is under management in the connections menu. And you would see tiles there that you can click into that relate to your account. However, if you are just kind of interested about what that information is being passed over to OpenAthens from that local directory, you can, of course, navigate to your local directory listing and just click into one of your accounts. And all of the fields that are being populated with data from that local directory will be visible there as well. And if you have any questions about what you're seeing or not seeing, you can, of course, pass that, that question to Galileo, and they can assist you in figuring that out. Now, the other account types that are available are managed accounts, and these are the accounts that are over here on the far left. And they are called managed accounts because these are accounts that you are going to manage natively within the OpenAthens interface. Now, you may only need to occasionally create an account in the personal account option, which is an account for an individual user. You know, if, for example, let's say that you need to provide an account for, you know, a vendor representative to help you troubleshoot a resource, you can create a personal account for that vendor representative and, you know, give them a limited access period and, you know, only allow them access to their particular resource. And we'll talk about, you know, how to do those various functions as we go along. If you want to create additional administrator accounts here in your OpenAthens dashboard so that you have multiple people who can log in here, you have that ability as well. And you do that by first creating a personal account. To create a personal account, you just go up to the accounts menu and click create, and then click personal account. There is a configuration wizard. It will walk you through determining, you know, what fields you need to actually input. I'm not going to actually go through the process of creating a personal account, you know, because of time, but I just want to, you know, point out where that option is available. But I will actually show you how to take it from this list, because where it then populates once you create this personal account is it then populates to this personal account, and then there is an additional step to actually add them as an administrator. So to do that, you would need to come up to the management menu and go to all organizations. You then click into your organization and you would click the edit option here. Then you go to the administrators tab. You are then going to search for that account. So you just kind of want to make a note, you know, jot down their username or, you know, the name if it's not one that, you know, like mine is easy to spell. In this case, I'm just going to pull in one of my staff test accounts that I created, and we can see here that it is presenting me two options. So I can select the one that is, you know, actually meant to be an administrator. Then you indicate what role this person should have. And in this case, I only have one option, which is organization administrator. So I click that and then click add. Once you click save changes, it's going to actually prompt you to enter your password to confirm that you are going to do that. I'm going to actually bypass that step just so that you don't watch me struggle to remember my password on screen. But again, clicking save changes will then prompt, will save that change as an administrator. And then when you come back into your account listing over here, and we'll just say, okay, you would then see them populated to the administrator tab here. And we can see that the one account that I do currently have set up is listed in here. All right, so another account type that I want to point out is an access account. Now, depending on how you want to manage guest users or walk-in users at your organization, you may choose to actually create personal accounts for them, and, you know, maybe make it a temporary 24-hour, you know, expiration date, or you may actually prefer to just create a shared account that everyone who is a walk-in or guest user can use. And these access accounts are location-based. So when you are configuring that, and you configure that again from your create option here, you will need to put in a recognized IP address or range of IPs to indicate that that is the location where that access account can be used. Then you have the ability to share those credentials with all of your guest users or walk-in users in your normal fashion, including, for example, you know, like you see public libraries where they have Wi-Fi credentials posted. Because these are location-based, it wouldn't necessarily hurt to, you know, have it near a computer lab somewhere visible. All right, so that kind of brings us through the accounts. And then the next thing we're going to look at is resources, but I will just go ahead and pause here and see if there are any questions, anything you'd like me to cover.
Maybe there are no questions at this time.
Sure.
I did just make a comment just for those who may be brand new to looking at things in the admin environment, that most of your users won't be created in this way. Most of them are created through either your identity management service or your catalog once they're connected to OpenAthens. But these personal accounts and access accounts are designed for the scenarios that Jamie described. If you need a vendor to be able to access, if you need to account for guest users, that's what the personal accounts are for. So just wanted to make that clarification for those who may be brand new, Jamie.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. All right, so then the next step in the process, and this is probably a key maintenance area to make note of, because, you know, as your collection changes, you may or may not need to make changes in your resource catalog in OpenAthens. So to actually access your resource catalog, you do have a shortcut from that main landing screen if that's what you're coming in to do, but you can also access your catalog from the resources menu. Now, accessing it this way is going to drop you down into the list of all resources that are available for allocation in your catalog. Now, I do like to mention here that all of the resources that appear here are the resources that are part of the same OpenAthens Federation that you are part of. So just because you see a resource in this catalog that is ready to be allocated, that does not mean at this time that it's actually ready on the content provider's end. So the first step of the process before you come into the resource catalog is just to kind of work with the content provider or work with GALILEO. So I see a comment in the chat box that they work closely with you guys to do this, and just confirm that everything has been provided to the content provider to enable OpenAthens authentication. Then once they indicate that is, you know, the case, you can then come into the catalog and you can find that resource and allocate it to the necessary permission sets. And we'll talk about permission sets right after this, but I'll just talk you through the allocation process. So let's say that I am going to allocate this particular resource. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the green drop-down menu and I'm going to select permission sets. Now, the permission sets that are configured in a system may vary by system. So you can see here, I have quite a few permission sets in my own system. You may have, you know, one or, you know, just fewer than I do. So at the very least, most of your resources are likely going to go into your default permission set, because that's going to be probably your largest user group if you have multiple permissions. In this case, I'm going to select my active users, my faculty users, and my staff users. Now you can see here that I've also set up a permission set for vendors. So, you know, kind of circling back to that use case I mentioned for personal accounts, I have created a permission set for vendors specifically that I can move resources in and out of as I need to work with those publishers or content providers to troubleshoot issues. So just to make a note that you may want to, at some point in the future when you need to work with a support rep, you may want to configure a similar one. And then I just click Update Allocation. So this is now enabling access to this resource through OpenAthens. Now you can then click into the tile, and there is a test button right here next to the access URL. This is where you can test vendor level access. So essentially this is going to launch me out to the platform, and you can test your OpenAthens authentication, ensuring that it is in fact working properly, or if not, at that point, you can then circle back to the content provider. I'm going to use the breadcrumb to jump back here. You also have access to a short list of allocated resources. So this is just a pre-filtered view where you can see all of your resources in your catalog. Now, when you are coming here to review this, to make sure, occasionally that this catalog is up to date, meaning you've added any newly subscribed resources or you have removed any that you no longer subscribe to, just keep in mind that it's not always a one-to-one reflection of, specific titles or databases. Looking at this, it's probably fairly obvious that most of these are at the platform level. So the only time you would really probably truly revoke permission for a particular resource is if you have canceled all subscription or all content on a particular platform. But that is something to keep in mind, that you should tidy this up when you actually do review and change your collection. And yes, good point. A good example of that is Ithaca, where you can see here that it's actually providing, if you click into it, it's also providing a description in here as to, which resources are accessible through this resource. So yes, thank you for that. Now, at some point, if you do come in here and you cannot locate a resource that you need to configure, this could indicate that it needs to be set up as a proxied resource, meaning it is dependent on the proxy server that you have with your OpenAthens subscription. So when that happens, and Russell can speak to the process, but generally speaking, we indicate that you contact your primary point of support. So if that is the GALILEO office, who then coordinates with EBSCO, or if it's direct to EBSCO support, you would work with them, and then EBSCO works with OpenAthens to get that set up and released to your catalog for allocation. Any questions or comments about resources and managing those resources?
That was great, Jamie. Yes, I will just reiterate for you that if an item is not available to be allocated, we certainly can work with EBSCO and OpenAthens to find and get that item allocated to your account, and we do that fairly often.
Thank you. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is kind of managing groups and permissions. So these things can have similar functionality, but they do have some differences as well. So you do have access under the management menu to a groups feature. And this is where you can actually create groups to put your managed accounts into kind of common categories. So for example, we can see that I've set up two groups just as a demonstration of, one indicating that it's an undergraduate student, one indicating that these are graduate students. So by clicking into these groups, oops, sorry, I meant to actually click the icon over here to the far right. That just kind of brings me into a pre-filtered view of the accounts that are associated with this group. So this is kind of help you manage your managed accounts. If you are using, as the comment in the chat box indicates, for anything not covered in your local directory. So for example, we have some systems that, may have guest lecturers for a extended period of time, and they may prefer to provide them personal accounts for that 6-month time that they are actually at the university, but not manage them in, their local directory. So you could create a group and put all of those people into that one, and then that makes it easy for you to come in and, work with those accounts at one time, or easily find users in those accounts. Now, you also have the ability, oh, and I should mention that groups can also be used for statistical purposes. So if, for example, you have multiple groups of guest lecturers, so that's a great question, and I'll jump back to the personal account list in just a second. So this can also be used for statistical purposes as well. Now, because groups are associated with managed accounts, what you would do is you can go to your account listing, and if you have a large number of accounts that are already here that you need to move into a group, you can easily do so by just checking off those accounts and clicking them in and adding them to the group membership. Now, if you have a batch of users that you do not have accounts for at this time, and you need to put them into a group, you have access to a bulk upload option to create managed accounts. And each system has a bulk template that is color coded depending on the required fields in your own system. So when you download this template, it will be, I believe the required fields are kind of in that light lavendery purple, and optional fields are in gray. And one of the columns in there is indicating what group and what permission set they should be included in. Oh, and I should just go ahead and point out, I will mention this later, but you do also have access to context sensitive helps within OpenAthens. So if you click into the submit option here, there is a question mark icon. And by clicking this, this will actually bring you into the bulk upload documentation where they have some embedded tutorials that may help as well. All right. So if you don't use managed accounts and you would like to kind of group your users into specific user groups, or into common categories, also for reporting purposes, you also have the ability to use permission sets. And so that's why in my demo account, I have set up multiple permission sets, because one of the benefits of using permission sets is that this also applies to your local accounts, and you can actually set up automated mapping rules to where if a user comes in, if a field matches a parameter in that user's record, it will read any rules and then put them into a permission set. And then you can also see this information in your statistics. So here I have actually used permission sets to kind of group my users into user groups or user demographics by what role they have at my university, because that's my demo account is kind of set up as an academic institution. Now, to create a permission set, you just click the create button, and it's a simple form to fill out. You have the option to select the roles that should be applied to all users in this permission set, but the majority of people just leave this set to member. It's kind of the default, but you do have a few options there. You also have access to shortcuts. So here we can see how I have actually, in my alumni users permission set, I have only allocated 4 resources. So permission sets also allow you to control who has access to what in your system. So if there are particular user groups based on license agreements that should not have access to certain resources, you have the ability to kind of, keep that resource away from them. And in this case, we can see that I only have a few resources allocated to this permission set. Now the counter over here is only going to give you an idea of how many managed accounts are associated with this permission set, but you can click into an account, a local account, to see what permission set they're being mapped into if you are curious about that. All right, so that brings us to linking. But before I move away from groups and permission sets, I just want to pause for a second and see if there are any questions about that. And again, permission sets and groups may vary account by account, depending on your individual needs. So I would just encourage you to kind of get into your own system and figure out what you have configured, and what you're actively using, just so that you can kind of stay abreast of that.
Jamie, I'll just comment that this is Russell, that we have set up some pretty extensive permission sets for a few of our libraries. I don't think they'll mind me mentioning them. For example, Barrilleaux has several resources that they limit access to for 1 or 2 departments. And Augusta University, for example, has their medical school and their main campus, and we use permission sets to allocate things appropriately there. One thing I will say, and I guess a question for you, Jamie, I think some of that can be attribute dependent, and Ken and I are doing a presentation on attributes this afternoon, and I just wanted to mention that.
Yes, and I'm hoping to make it to that one. I have a meeting right before, but I'm interested in hearing the discussion. So yes, and that is true. That is dependent on attributes being in the user record. So the first step in that is just confirming that you have something in the user record to, let's say you want to map people into permission sets based on departments, for example. You would just need to make sure that that is tracked in the user record. And if that is tracked, then you have the ability to have those automated mapping rules set up. So I do see a question about, can you bulk change a group of patrons to disable? I'm going to go ahead and hold that one until the end. We'll jump back into accounts and kind of talk about some of the individual actions that are available in a little more detail at the end. So let's go ahead and move over to linking really quickly. So linking is also available through your resources menu. You have access to a redirector link generator. And when you click this, there are a few options for generating redirector links. Now you do have the ability to just grab this prefix from right here and paste that to your target or base URL. However, we actually recommend that you use option 2 or option 3, and option 3 is for batch generation, to generate your redirector links. The reason for that is that some content providers may not actually be encoding their URLs. That's where they are converting special characters in the URL to something that, you know, won't trip the browser up. So by using these two options below, this will actually generate an encoded URL so that they should not experience any browser related issues. Now, this is also where I like to point out those context sensitive helps by clicking this this question mark here. The reason for this is this redirector link generator is kind of locked behind the admin login screen. And you may not actually want to provide an admin account for every single staff member who may need to generate redirector links. So you do have access, and we'll just give that a second to load. In this help article, you do have access to a more public facing redirector link generator. And by public facing, I mean that it is accessible to anyone who is a valid user of your OpenAthens system. So when they click this, they will actually be prompted to authenticate, indicating they are a valid user, and they can then access this URL. So I'll just go ahead and pop that in the chat if anybody's interested in sharing that out. Yep. Oh, great. That's an excellent comment there. I'll just pause if you want to just go ahead and say that, Russell.
Sure, and thank you for letting me continue to chime in. Just for those of you who may be brand new and haven't implemented OpenAthens yet, when we kind of turn over the keys to OpenAthens to you, we give you a full list of URLs so that you can easily update your URLs on your website. We can also help you if you have libguides. We can help you by kind of bulk exporting, and then give you a list of links to bulk by import back into libguides. And then our Galileo Express links only need a minor change to work properly with OpenAthens, because we Athenize links behind the scenes for our databases in Galileo once we've added those in. And Mike White can show you, or he did probably show you in the admin session and the ongoing admin training that we do, how to set up OpenAthens resources in the Galileo backend, just to comment on that as well. So just a few things there. Thanks, Jaime.
Yeah, excellent. That's an excellent service. All right, so this is how you can quickly generate some redirector links. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about preferences, but what I do want to point out are the redirector preferences, because this controls the behavior of your links, and it can also control some of the behavior of your statistics. So I do like to just kind of highlight this here. So if you come into your redirector preferences and you see a list of IP addresses here, or maybe a single IP address for some reason, what this means is that you have an IP bypass configured. So that means if a user clicks a redirector link from within that recognized IP address or range of IPs, they will not be prompted to log in with their OpenAthens. They will not be prompted to authenticate through OpenAthens. Instead, they will just be brought directly to the resource. and if that is the expected behavior of your links, then, that is certainly fine to, leave those IP addresses here. It's just an important point of maintenance in that you need to make sure that this is on your list of updates anytime your IP addresses get updated. So just keep that in mind. It's also a good, indication, or it's a good, I like to mention this here, because if your link behavior changes, this is also something to look at. So perhaps you had an IP bypass configured, it was going direct to resource from on campus, for example, and suddenly that has changed. You might want to come here and see, one, are your IP addresses out of date, or have they been removed and need to be reset? So then, again, just to mention, this does also bypass some of the triggers for the reporting module. So it's just kind of important to mention that if you notice that some of your numbers seem a little low in some areas, that could be because they are not actually accruing metrics by bypassing the login. So it says, does the redirector link go into the access URL text box on the resource details page? There you go. So that really, I think, kind of depends. The access URL in the resource details page is kind of just testing vendor level access out to the platform. So at its most basic level, yes, that would be where the redirector link would go. Sometimes depending on what functionality is available, or if you have configured deeper linking in your resource catalog, it may actually go to the individual database, or to an individual title, but some of that depends on what is configured in your system. All right, so the next step in this is to talk about reporting, which I know is kind of the really cool thing about OpenAthens, but that will take me away from the screen a little bit. So just to stop for a moment and make sure that we don't have any last questions about, the redirector linking or the IP bypass. All right, I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat box, so.
Yeah, I just added a comment, Jamie. I generally just, for Galileo users, we just generally recommended taking that vendor IP access link to an individual database and Athenizing it and then testing it versus testing it in the test area. We just found that that's more consistent and it works better for our end users, just as a Galileo specific thing that we do.
Yeah, great. That's a great recommendation. Thank you for adding that. All right, so let's, sorry, I am in my domain browser, which means I then have to go into my reports module another way. All right, sorry. I'm gonna pull this down just so that you don't have to see me fumble for a second. All right. All right, good time to post any other burning questions that you have to the chat box while I try to get this. I forgot that they switched it to, hold on. So I've got to log out. I apologize. I've got to log out and log back in. They switched it to where we don't have access to the reporting module through the domain browser anymore. So.
Jamie, I'll take on this question for you while you're getting
Awesome.
ready.
Thank
Jim's
you.
asked, what is a scenario where you would use the redirector link generator? Jim, if you wanted to provide an Athenized link in the Galileo scenario to something that you didn't have in GLRI, where we apply the automatic regeneration, you could do that. You could also use it to provide a redirector link to an individual article as well, if it wasn't already formatted for that. Now that would certainly require some testing before I would send it out to a faculty member or post it on a learning management system page, but those are two common scenarios where one might use the redirector link generator. But to Jim's point, Galileo has done a lot of work to save you some of the work in the redirector link generator by essentially taking on the Galileo backend and creating an automatic link generation protocol behind the scenes so that for individual databases, once they're entered in correctly for things in GLRI, Galileo Local Resource Integration, that you don't have to worry about it. So we do it automatically in the Galileo backend.
And that is fantastic. All right, so we got into the reporting module. So just to mention where you actually find that. So under your statistics menu, you would see reporting listed there. And then when you do that, that's kind of takes you slightly out into a different module. Now, of course, when you have an active system like you guys most likely do, you are going to see, you know, much prettier things on your screen rather than this no data available. But I'll just kind of talk you through what would generally be visible to you here, and then we'll talk about the various account options. So here on this tab, the top resources, this is going to give you the top resources that were used within the X number of days. And you do have, you know, some options here as to how far back or how recent you want to look. Now, these are clickable tiles, so you would actually be able to click into one of those reports and drill down into that specific resource usage report. So it provides a shortcut into specific reports. You would also see a look at the total number of authentications that have occurred in your system. And this is more just kind of, you know, like the hills and valley chart. I don't know the technical term for that. So you also have a look at your number of accounts. And then down here, you have a pretty cool heat map kind of showing you where your users are logging in from. And, you know, if you have users that are kind of scattered across the globe, this can be quite fun to look at when you see all of the various places that they are coming in from. Now you have access to account reports, and these reports provide different options, different parameters, depending on what you're looking for. So the account totals report, and I'll just click into it. I'm not going to necessarily adjust anything, but this account totals report provides a look at the total number of accounts in OpenAthens. Now you do have, you know, some options here, but keep in mind that some of this depends on what OpenAthens has visibility into. So, you know, it can be one way where the having a local directory connection limits some of the metrics that you are actually able to see in the reporting module, because there are certain things in the local directory that OpenAthens, or actually everything in the local directory, OpenAthens doesn't have visibility into, only those things that are actually being brought from the local directory into OpenAthens. So for example, we can see here, there's an activity report about password change. Well, OpenAthens does not know when, OpenAthens does not necessarily know when a password has been changed in the local directory. So, you know, again, it's not going to accrue a metric for that. So some of these reports will be very specific to your managed accounts. The next one is authentications. This is going to provide you a look at the total number of authentications. And I will just jump back quickly to where I do actually have some data in my demo account, just so that you can kind of see what this looks like. So here I have data for about a 2-month period. So you can see here the total number of authentications that occurred. And if OpenAthens has visibility into why an authentication had failed, you would also be able to toggle those data sets on and see that in your reporting module. And in this case, we can see that two of my account holders attempting to access were expired accounts and also a failed password. Hovering over these data points on the visualization can also give you a look at the metrics that are going on. And here we can see the total versus unique. And so sometimes you may have one user log in multiple times a day. This could be if the cookie expired, or if they switched devices and had not yet set a cookie and had to re-authenticate. You also have more granularity on this particular report, whereas you don't have the option to change this on the totals report. This one will actually let you go down into hourly or expand out to monthly, depending on what you are looking to see. And that is an excellent point. Someone posted in the chat box that you can use this to see if users went and used content right after instruction sessions. So yes, that can be quite cool. So this updates on a 24-hour cycle, right? Yes, so there is about a 24-hour delay for your metrics being exposed in the reports module. Now, the account usage report and the resource usage report, which we'll look at briefly in just a moment, is where some of your custom metrics, some of your custom attributes, or some of those additional fields that you may be using in your system. So for example, you can switch this to a breakdown by, and here we can see group, because I mentioned some of you may be organizing some of your managed accounts into groups, or even by permission set. So this is where I, in my particular system, am using permission sets to group my users into common categories. So I can see that information right here. So that provides deeper linking. Now, what actually appears here as a reportable attribute also depends on your schema editor, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I just want to let you know that this can be as anonymized as you'd like it. So you may prefer not to go down to the individual user level, like email address or a username, like I have done so in my own system. Rather, you may prefer to kind of keep it at the user demographic level, where you're just kind of looking at group or permission set, or even department or job title, for example. All right, and then the other report that I want to point out is the resource usage report. So this is where you can get a look at your resource usage. This is giving us a breakdown of all resources, but you have options to filter to a specific resource if you would like to do so. And you also have the ability to use some of those additional parameters in this particular report as well. And in this case, you can actually run this resource usage report against all resources and then choose a secondary breakdown. So I want to do all resources by permission set. And again, you have that option for granularity. Do you want to look at resource usage hourly? So again, going back to that comment, if you were just doing some bibliographic instruction on a particular resource and you kind of want to get an idea, did a lot of people go in within, the next hour or day of that instruction to use that resource? This is a good option for you. Now, one thing to also mention here is that the resource usage report is essentially providing you platform level usage. It is not going to give you title level or database level. So it's essentially what it's indicating that the user passed successfully over to this resource, but what they did once they were on that platform or in that database, OpenAthens doesn't have any visibility into. So that you would still need to depend on your counter metrics, your counter statistics, or your standard usage, your standard database usage reports, depending on what your preference or workflow is around that. So these are meant to be complementary rather than a replacement of those reports. So I've been seeing a lot of chats go through. Is there anything that I need to answer? Because I was also seeing some answers go through.
Yeah, well, I think we need to expand on some of the answers, though. Sorry, I
That's okay.
steal your thunder at all, because
no, it's fine.
You didn't expand on all of these. That's a great question that came from Rachel Evans. Is there any difference between using the admin side redirector versus the free and open redirector? I said that I tend to use the free one all the time, just because I don't like to log in if I don't have to. But then Rachel observed that she noticed a different look to some of the URLs when she would use the free versus the in admin. And then Michelle Colquitt made the good point that doing bulk imports of links is something that she does in the one in OpenAthens admin, and that's a good use case for that as well. But just wondering, to get to the point, if there's any difference between the links that you generate with the two different platforms, and if so, why?
I have not seen, I have not noticed the difference in the syntax. That's a great question that I can pass back to the team at EBSCO.
Yeah.
but I certainly in the testing have not noticed any difference in the behavior, even if the link looks different.
That's kind of been my experience, but Rachel did observe it could be the tiny differences in the way of, vendor platforms change so often that it could very well be attributed to little changes in vendor platform and vendor authentication.
Yes,
that's a really good point.
That is very true.
And then the other thing that we were having some discussion about was length of session. And I pointed out that an OpenAthens cookies typically sets for 8 hours. And then I was differentiating. We have just recently been working with EBSCO primarily to extend the length of vendor timeout for a session, because we do get a lot of feedback from end users every year on our annual survey that they are frustrated by vendor session timeouts. And this is particularly a use case. I'll use the most recent support ticket that we got about this was from someone at our Augusta at our medical school, who was frustrated because they would be working on a project for a really long time, for more than 2 or 3 hours, and then they would come back to find they'd lost the article that they were working from on on one screen while they were writing their paper on another. And I get that frustration, but we've been working with our vendors to extend those vendor timeouts to be as long as possible. But the OpenAthens cookie lasts for 8 hours. Was my response on that? Just to go into too much detail. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Yes, the OpenAthens cookie lasts for 8 hours, but yes, they are then subject, unfortunately, to the timeouts on the platforms, and those can vary by platforms. Which can be really frustrating for them when they're not having a consistent timeout experience across multiple providers. So I believe EBSCO by default forces like a 2-hour timeout, if I remember correctly.
If I remember correctly, Wayne just went through and extended everything to the maximum, which was, I believe, 3 hours, but it's either 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But we've done that for every EBSCO resource.
Yeah, and that is something with EBSCO specifically that, yes, I believe it is 2 hours. And I can't remember what the standard was for allowing additional if it was requested. I don't remember if that was by request, but that is also something that is feedback that is definitely helpful for Amanda, particularly since she is product manager for authentication, to give that to her so that she can then pursue that internally and see what options are available.
Yeah. And I will say, just on the Galileo side, we're pretty much in constant communication with Amanda about these issues, and I will certainly remind her about that. And yes, the 3-hour vendor timeout would apply to every EBSCO subscriber. 2 to 3 hours. I'll need to look. I'll check and post as to what that actual number was. But the OpenAthens cookie at 8 hours applies to every OpenAthens user as well. Just to clarify that. Thank you for that question, Alicia.
Yeah, and I don't recall that OpenAthens will actually extend that. I believe 8 hours is kind of the max.
We've had some conversations about that, and that's sort of where we've landed. I think they have it as sort of we have certainly submitted as a change request based on the experience that Georgia Tech had early on. They moved back to using IP access on campus because of that faculty frustration with the 8-hour cookie.
Yeah, and I mean, those faculty members are often doing research in their office for 12, 14 hours a day. So you could certainly understand, understand that for sure. All right, so it sounds like all of that was covered pretty well. So I'll just continue on. And in this case, now we'll kind of look at the Schema Editor, which is where you can control what attributes are reportable. Because I did mention that, in these particular the account usage report and the resource usage report, you can go as deep into the user data as you'd like, if you want to go to the personal level, or kind of keep it at the surface demographics. And where you control that is in your Schema Editor, and that is accessed. And I am a child account, so now I've got to open a different domain browser. So just give me one quick second. Sometimes this is fun, working in multiple accounts. Shows you can juggle well, right? All right, so here we go. All right, so now I am in my parent account. And to access your Schema Editor, you go to your Preferences menu here, and you're going to look for the Schema Editor option. Now, this will also tell you, in addition to which attributes are reportable, it also indicates which attributes are required in your system and which attributes are releasable. Now, as you scroll down, you will see those indicated with, color-coded labels. So reportable are in blue, releasable are in green, and required are in red. Now, you may know that you have multiple fields coming in from your local directory, but scrolling down, you may see no custom attributes configured, or you may see a limited amount. So one thing I do like to also point out is that sometimes those custom attributes coming in from your local directory may be mapped to delivered fields. So, just keep in mind that when you are looking in your reporting module and you are seeing data for some of your users, it could be because it is being mapped to a delivered field. You should also kind of come in and just get familiar with which custom attributes have been configured in your system, if they have been. Now, if you want to make an attribute reportable, so for example, you can hover over that particular attribute, and in the case of core attributes, you will see an indicator over here, or a clickable label, that you mark this as reportable, and it will then change the behavior of that attribute. Now, another thing to keep in mind with this is that the attribute is only reportable from that point forward after that 24-hour delay of getting that data into the system. So it's not going to be able to go in and backdate any of your existing data with that attribute. If you need to edit a custom attribute to indicate whether it should now be required or reportable, you actually click the edit button, and there's some check boxes under there. Now, the next thing to point out is you may notice that all of these attributes in here, or almost all except for the notes field, is indicated as releasable. So I do also like to just point out in this case that just because an attribute in your schema editor is marked releasable does not mean it's actually being released. So if that is something of concern to you when you are looking at your schema editor, the next place to look is just in your attribute release policy. This is the area that controls all of the attributes that are being released out to your third-party content providers to make those handshakes with OpenAthens work. So for example, you're going to always have a global attribute release policy. This is identifying you as an organization, kind of passing your organization information over to OpenAthens. And your particular attributes that are in this global policy may not specifically match the ones that you see in mine, but you can check and see what information is here. And in some cases, you may actually see specific policies then set up with additional attributes for other content providers. And the reason for this is you may have configured single sign-on, or in some cases, that content provider supports a personalization experience. So again, I'd like to use Ithaca here as an example. They like to encourage their users to create JSTOR accounts using email addresses. So here we've actually set up a release policy to pass the email address over so that personalization experience is supported. So again, if you are curious about what attributes are actually being passed over to those third-party providers, that's in your preferences menu under the attribute release. And that kind of brings me to the end of the OpenAthens demo. But before I go into the additional resources, I'm happy to just stop and see if there's anything else we want to cover or circle back to. And I know we did leave one question unanswered about updating.
Before you leave, sorry, Jenny, before you leave attribute release policies, I just wanted to make one comment. This is something that I want to emphasize that your institution is in absolute control of. Galileo by default set up all resources to pass the minimum attributes required for access, with one exception, and that exception is EBSCO, where we pass a few more attributes to support, as Jamie mentioned, the personalization experience. We decided the value of that personalization experience and the privacy warnings and setup that EBSCO has available for that. They do a really nice job of giving a user all the information they need to make an informed decision about whether or not they want to use that EBSCO SSO service. That is the only one that we do by default. Now, there are other vendors, as Jamie mentioned, that support that personalization experience. And if you want your users to be able to take advantage of that, certainly reach out to those vendors. I know Elsevier supports it. You mentioned Ithaca and several others are really interested in users having that account so that they can manage their resource lists and other things on that vendor platform. So just wanted to mention that we only authorize the minimum attributes being passed for a vendor, except for as otherwise stated. So thank you, Jamie. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no need to apologize. You're providing really great information. All right, so circling back to the question we had earlier was, can you bulk change a group of patrons to disable? So that is a yes or no. Hold on, sorry, just trying to get back into my demo. So that is a yes or no answer. So in the case of local accounts, that would be done over in your local directory. So you have the ability coming into here to permanently delete those accounts out of OpenAthens, but unless they are disabled over in that local directory, the next time a user logs in, it would then just be repopulated back here. So if it's local accounts that you need disabled, I would just, recommend that you coordinate with whoever you normally coordinate with on your campus to, have those user accounts disabled. As far as any managed accounts, you have options for, again, multi-selecting some of these, and you can then, batch delete them. That puts them into this deleted column here. Or this deleted tab, I should say, but you also have some other options. So for example, you can batch email them. You can modify their expiration dates. So if, for example, you have a large number of managed accounts that you're using for a special user group, and a lot of them expired at the same time, you can come in and check those off specifically, and then, batch modify. You also have in your bulk option up here, you have an option to batch delete through this upload process as well. So in a scenario where a user indicates their credentials have been compromised, how might you turn off that user's access? So if they are indicating that to you, my recommendation would be that, again, local account, it's really going to kind of depend. You can, of course, delete their account in OpenAthens, but some of that might be coordinating with whoever manages the local directory to suspend that account. That being said, OpenAthens does have security measures in place to where if they believe that an account has been compromised, if, for example, I believe one scenario that came through was where a user, logged in with their account in Chile and then, an hour later in China. Obviously, that is physically impossible, and OpenAthens has measures in place as well as additional measures, which they keep close to the vest for obvious reasons, but they suspend the account automatically as well. At that time, they email the administrator that the account has been suspended, and they email the user that the account has been suspended. So at that point, it's up to you to kind of go into the system and determine if that was like a false alarm and the account needs to be reactivated, or if, it was in fact suspended and, in the local directory, perhaps measures need to be taken to update that user's account information to, change it.
And Jenny, thank you for that.
Yep.
I've had to do that once. And I have to admit, the one thing that kind of hides on this page, because it's up at the very top, going back to Jessica's question, when you're wanting to do something or find a group involved in the account search, it sort of hides up there. And I'll admit that I was like, wait a minute, there's a way to search. And it kind of caught me off guard when I finally found it.
Yes. Yeah, and good point there. If you do a search up there, for whatever you're searching for, you will see, a number appear next to the tab. Now, it can take a little bit more time for the counter to load with your local account, depending on how many accounts you have there. So I always just recommend, going and grabbing a sip of water and giving that a chance to load so that it can actually crawl through, because sometimes you can have, upwards of tens of thousands of accounts for it to crawl through. But then you can, of course, go straight there. So yes, when you receive that email indicating that a user's account has been suspended, that is an excellent point, is to come in and use this account search. And you do also have access to advanced search options. But some of these advanced search options are limited to managed account. So just searching by the user's name can actually get you where you need to go. And I know we are at 2 minutes before time. So I do just want to kind of point out the resources that I was going to mention. We have talked about the context sensitive helps. You have access to that from the various pop-up screens, but you also always have access to that using this question mark here in the upper right. So for example, clicking that's going to bring me to this search option. We also have additional training resources that are available on EBSCO Connect. And you can access these training resources by clicking Learning or going into Find Courses in EBSCO Academy. And here is the first link that I'm going to populate, or actually I'll just go ahead and populate all of this to the chat box now, but I'll kind of talk you through all of these things. So going into EBSCO Academy is going to bring you to a large number of resources. There is a video collection specific to OpenAthens, and OpenAthens was actually nice enough to share their OpenAthens 101 series with us. So you can see here, you have all of these resources available as well. And you may notice that I posted a link. I won't actually navigate there, but I posted a link to the public training session that I do every month where I take a little bit of a deeper dive into this. And coming soon, we will actually have an OpenAthens do-it-yourself health check, which will cover a lot of this. So I'm sorry to say that really, really fast, but oh, great. I'm glad that you have a LibGuide that you can add them to. So yeah, and
I haven't already. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, not a problem.
And then just a reminder for folks, there's the virtual learning environment that OpenAthens creates that you have to access through your admin login. There are great training sessions there that go into a lot of detail also. But thank you for that, Jamie. I'll share these on our LibGuide as well.
Yeah, and I know you probably all need to rush off to the next session, so I will just say the last resource is, of course, me. Feel free to reach out to me directly via email if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer questions through email as well.
Well, I want to say thank you to our audience, and thank you so much, Jamie. This was great, and thank you all for indulging me with some Galileo-specific comments as we went through. I hope this is helpful to everyone, and of course, Jamie's here as a resource, and Galileo support, we're always here for you if you have specific questions. If you haven't implemented OpenAthens yet, and this opened some cans of worms for you, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.